Are you often confused as to how your relationships turn out the way they do? Do you wonder why you keep attracting the same types of partners over and over again? Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you a fascinating tool that I've discovered that has helped me to get the answers to those questions. So stay tuned. Hi, my name is Michael Doyle. Welcome to the channel and to Tools Tuesday. On the first Tuesday of every month, I do a video where I share a tool that has helped me and that I've learned somewhere along my 50-year journey of personal and spiritual development. And today I'm going to share with you how understanding the psychological framework known as attachment theory has helped me to get the answers to the questions that I've opened with. And because there are so many theoretical videos out there by experts who know far more about this topic than I do, I thought that I would share some examples from my own life that could add a practical component to all of this theory. In the description box below, I'll put a link to 3 experts on this topic who have helped me significantly. There are plenty more, but these are 3 that I think are really good. I was married and divorced twice by the time I was 28 years old, so I knew I was in trouble when it came to relationships. And before the second marriage ended, I started to read all I could about relationships, attended workshops, did marriage encounter. I especially focused on material that would help me with communication. After about 15 years of applying and studying what I had learned, I began to do some coaching with individuals and couples. And I also facilitated a couple of relationship workshops. My study of the subject continued throughout my adult life. And then 17 years ago, a significant relationship ended, and given all the work that I had done and how careful I had been about choosing a partner who I had a lot in common with, I decided that I wasn't going to date or get involved with anyone else until I had done even more work on myself, because I knew that whoever I was getting in the relationship with was a reflection of where I was at. So I never dated anyone or got involved with anyone for 8 years. And then I met someone that I thought was the one that I thought I had a lot in common with. We dated for 3 months, and it was for all of that time like a honeymoon. And then all of a sudden, within a 24-hour period, the relationship had crashed and burned, and there was no further contact and no closure. So once again, I was very perplexed as to how this could happen, even especially after I had done as much work as I had done. I turned to A Course in Miracles, which I had been a student of for a long time, and I took a deep dive into the material in the text on special love relationships. Now, as nice as that sounds, A Course in Miracles juxtaposes the special love relationship with the holy relationship. A special love relationship is not what's in our best interests, and a holy relationship is. By doing that deep dive into that material, I was able to clean up a lot of what I had going on and significantly grew as a result, to the point where I would consider myself to be or to have what attachment theory defines as a secure attachment style. But that remains untested. We don't actually get our core wounds triggered in a relationship until we're actually relating with someone. So even though, in theory, I believe I would have a securely attached style now, I haven't dated anyone or been involved with anyone again for 8 years. So I thought I had pretty much covered the gamut of all the relationship material that was out there. However, much to my surprise, during the past year, I discovered attachment theory. And diving into that was so eye-opening. It connected all the dots for me. It gave me clarity that I never had before and helped me to see my blind spots when it comes to how I attract the same type of partners and what my patterns are in relating to people. And so I'm going to share some of that with you. What I've come to discover is there's a very strong correlation between the material in A Course in Miracles on special love relationships and holy relationships and the concepts taught in attachment theory. And I can tell you, with this new knowledge, as a single person, I will never attract the same type of partner again. And even if I do remotely attract someone who resembles these past partners that I was continuously attracting over and over again, I know that I will handle it significantly differently than I have in the past. As I say, I'm not an expert on the subject, but I'm going to cover off some of the basics for you and share some of my personal experiences. I will be referring to my notes throughout this video. Attachment theory is a psychological framework that was developed by a British psychologist, John Bowlby, I think back in the 80s, and later it's been expanded on by many others. And at first it focused on the nature of the emotional bonds and attachments formed between children and their caregivers. And it suggests that these early attachments, ones that have been made, believe it or not, between the ages of birth and 2 years old, have a significant influence on how we relate to people in general and to romantic partners especially, who have the most access to our core wounds. And these various styles of attachment that I'm going to talk about were various strategies that infants develop to get their needs met because they're so dependent upon their caregivers to give them what they need. And if they don't get it one way, they develop another strategy to try and get those needs met. And so these attachment styles refer a lot to these various strategies that we learned in order to get our needs met. Attachment theory has brilliantly evolved from its earlier writings focusing on children and their caregivers to adult romantic relationships and how those attachment strategies play out in our adult relationships. I highly recommend those of you who are parents of young children or considering having children that you do some research and get educated on attachment theory, because I promise you it will change the way you parent your children. So there are 4 attachment styles, and they fall into 2 categories: secure attachments and insecure attachments. There's only one form of secure attachment, and that's to be securely attached, to have a secure attachment style. And there are 3 insecure attachment styles. As one of the experts that I'm going to refer you to, Heidi Priebe, says, that we're all familiar with how we can have physical illnesses, but we're not so in tune with, or there's not much knowledge about how we can be emotionally sick. And emotionally sick refers to how when we didn't get our needs met as infants, we developed these strategies that may have worked as babies, but they don't work for us now. And so basically we're emotionally sick because we're not having our needs met, and we use very ineffective strategies to try and get them met in relationships. The first attachment style that I'm going to talk about is the secure attachment style. And the more we learn about how that style functions, the more we realize that this is sort of the model that we all want to be working toward. And the world view, as Heidi says, of someone with a secure attachment style is, I'm okay and you're okay. From an emotional sickness point of view, we have healthy immune systems when we have a secure attachment style. And we have healthy beliefs like the world is a safe place. I'm capable of loving and being loved. When things get a bit rough, I can depend on my caregivers or my loving partner to help me to meet my needs. And I'm going to be there for them as well when they're having a rough time and they're having certain needs. People with a secure attachment style have no aversion to being in a relationship, but they also are perfectly okay to be on their own, just as I mentioned I am at now. They function just fine within one, and they function just fine being on their own. They're in touch with their own wants and needs, and they take them seriously, and they look at meeting them for themselves, but they also understand that their partners have wants and needs, and that they should be taken seriously as well. And this is a very rational approach to relationships. It's about give and take and win-win. The next attachment style we're going to look at is one of the insecure attachment style of the three that there are. And this is known as the anxious or anxious preoccupied attachment style. And this is the one that I lived for most of my life. Now, just to give you a little bit of background on how this anxious preoccupied attachment style develops. When I was born, my siblings were all older than me. 3 siblings were 13, 15, and 17 years old when I was born, and my mother and father lived in the house. My father was an alcoholic who couldn't hold down a job if his life depended on it, and the household was very chaotic. By the time I was 3 years old, my 3 siblings had all moved out of the house, and my mother left my father. So while I may have gotten maybe inconsistent attention, at least there were enough people around the house to give me some attention and to meet some of my needs. But all of a sudden they were all gone except for my mother. And my mother was the next style, which is a dismissive avoidant. So all of a sudden I'm feeling abandoned and I'm not getting my needs met. And the only person left is my mother. So naturally, there's a tremendous anxiety around, well, if all the others have left, maybe she's going to leave too. And so that's where the anxiety comes in, and where there's a preoccupation on the outside caregiver, and to always be developing strategies to try and get my needs met. That's one example of how an anxious attachment strategy develops. We learned that the world is not a safe place, that I'm inadequate to deal with the challenges of my life, and that I can't count on anybody to be there for me to help me meet my needs. We have an overwhelming desperation for love because we're starving, we're emotionally neglected when we have a dismissive, avoidant parent. Consequently, we are the most invested in relationships. All the work that I did all those years to secure my knowledge of relationships and how to be better in relationships is very typical of somebody with an anxious attachment style. If I get really good at relationship, then I'm going to meet someone and attract the kind of person who's going to meet my needs. Because, like, why would anybody want to leave that if I'm so good at relationship, right? I've done a significant amount of work on this over time, but there was a point in time where I could not regulate my own emotions, and that's common for anxiously attached people. They don't know how to regulate their own emotions. And for me, the reason was I was taught that either I wasn't feeling what I was feeling, or that what I was feeling was totally invalid. And so what could I do with feelings? I was just so confused, I would just learn to shut them all down. Our core wounds as anxiously attached people are that we will be rejected and abandoned, that we will be excluded, disliked, and rejected, that we feel very unsafe when people pull away and create any distance. We usually develop a very low self-image of ourselves, and we'll seek out partners that have qualities that we admire or that we think are special, and in the belief that if we get those partners, then they will add the value and we would be seen by other people as having worth and value. My first wife was a beauty queen. She was very beautiful. She was sort of in my outside circle of acquaintances. We had never met, but I knew her sister. And one day the opportunity came for me to meet her, and I took that chance. I wasn't going to pass this up. I met her, and immediately when I got home, called and asked her out on a date, which she accepted. And the day after the date, I asked her to get together. And right then and there, I told her that was it. I knew what I wanted. She was the one I wanted. I wanted her to be my girlfriend, and would she agree to do so? And she later said that the reason she agreed to was because the night before, when we were on the date, we went to a house party where I was going to be renting a maid's quarters on a waterfront property, and she saw a summer full of fun ahead, so she agreed right away to be my girlfriend. But going all in like that so quickly is typical of an anxious attachment or anxiously preoccupied attachment style. We want to lock them in. Now, what's also typical of an anxious attachment style is we don't think in terms of what are my needs, how compatible am I going to be with someone. We don't think about ourselves. We think in terms of the other person and what that other person can do for us. We set them up to meet our emotional needs. I had all these images of what she was going to be like as this beautiful person that everybody admired. And I remember looking back on this and thinking, it was like, yeah, if I got this woman, it would make up for all the heartache and everything that I had experienced. But the reality of being married to her was like, what's this? Like a dismissive, avoidant. It was like my needs weren't going to get met at all, right? So it was like a year and a half later, I left that relationship and we divorced. I thought, well, I've learned my lesson with beautiful women. I'm never going to fall for that again. So I ended up in a rebound relationship with a woman who, she was attractive, but she was the kind of woman that everybody loved, right? One of those really highly sociable people, very intelligent, that everybody gathered around her, and she was extremely popular. And so again, right, if I get this woman that everybody loves, then I'm going to have value and people are going to love me, all unconscious, right? Again, it had nothing to do with what do I need, what do I want, how compatible are we going to be. It was all about her and getting her. And so again, within 3 years, that relationship fell apart. Again, a dismissive avoidant, right? There was no way I was getting my needs met. So just to cover up a couple points I've already mentioned, but we get very anxious when our partner needs space because they're pulling away, and that triggers core wounds of abandonment and rejection. We often feel like we're giving, and not getting anything in return. And I recently had to look at a male relationship that I had with somebody since I'm 3 years old, a friend, that we're still in contact. However, I had to reevaluate that relationship because I saw this dynamic at play, where I was in this attachment preoccupied state, and that it was all about him all our life. It's always been about him, and that I was giving myself up in order to maintain this relationship and keep this relationship. And so I'm in the process of evaluating, okay, how do I really go about doing this? So the path to growth for someone with this particular style is to build up their own self-esteem. Now, that is not to say that I did not do a lot of that work, building up my own self-esteem and my self-image in other areas, in business. But when it came to relationships, because we have these core wounds that don't get triggered outside of a romantic relationship, then In terms of a romantic relationship and being able to relate to someone, development of self-image and self-esteem is an important facet of this, so that we learn that we're lovable and worthy of being loved, and we know how to meet our own needs. Moving on now to the dismissive avoidant, which is very common for an anxious preoccupied to attract, and for a dismissive avoidant to attract anxiously preoccupied. The worldview of a dismissive avoidant attachment style is they have a positive view of themselves and a negative view of others. So I'm okay and you're not okay. Their core wounds are I'm defective, I feel helpless, I feel powerless, I feel weak if I have to rely on other people, I don't belong and I'm an outsider. Everybody else is not okay and I'm okay and I'm an outsider. The way that that attachment style develops is, in my case, where the presence of my mother and my caregiver and her meeting my needs and being there for me was totally inconsistent. In some cases, the parent just isn't there for them, especially if they got like older siblings, a large family, and they're the baby or whatnot. They may never get their needs met. Not never, but they suffer from tremendous emotional neglect. So the strategy that this particular infant develops is, look, obviously nobody's going to meet my needs, so I need to learn how to take care of myself and how to meet my own needs. So they adapt to emotional neglect. Now, because they do have needs and nobody's going to meet them, and they are too young to meet them, the way that they deal with their feelings and emotions is they totally deny them, totally bury them. If I don't have needs, then I can't be hurt when they're not met. And so people who stuff their feelings and emotions are more apt to develop various painkillers, various addictions. Could be anything from work to substances, anything that will numb out the pain of the feelings and emotions that they have denied. Even though they want to be in romantic relationships and have sexual partners, they're very triggered by intimacy. They're very sensitive to their boundaries being violated. They have a pattern of moving closer and pulling away, and they see other people's needs as inappropriate and as crossing boundaries. They're always on the lookout for somebody wanting something from them. One example in the last relationship that I had with a dismissive avoidant, she drank coffee, but it was always, she'd leave her house in the morning and go get a coffee at Starbucks or wherever. And when I was starting to spend evenings there and weekends there, I wanted coffee in the morning, and I got up much earlier than she did, so I bought a coffee machine so that I could have coffee in the morning. Well, apparently, she went into a bit of a panic mode because of that. Her boundaries all of a sudden were threatened. And like, what did this mean? Does he think he's moving in here? What's next? So it totally triggered her core wounds. They're very afraid of people relying on them. They can take love in small doses, but then they have to pull away and recharge. That was very present in my last relationship, where as an anxiously attached person whose core wounds had been triggered because of how vulnerable I was in this relationship for the first time, I, of course, wanted to spend as much time as possible with her. And she would come up with all these excuses as to why we could not be together that evening or why we could not go do a certain thing. And then I would discover later that she didn't do anything that she said that she was going to do when she pulled away from me. She was just taking time to recharge, because that's what a dismissive avoidant needs. So the way that they self-soothe and take care of their own needs is they push everybody away and they withdraw. So what a dismissive avoidant needs is to feel safe in the relationship. When they feel really safe and their boundaries aren't threatened and nobody's going to need anything from them or need to rely on them, then they feel more safe to come out and express some of their feelings and emotions. They need a lot of acknowledgement and appreciation, because they certainly didn't get that when they were infants. and a lot of empathy to be understood when they need to withdraw and when they shut down. And their path to growth is to learn to see other people as okay, and that needs can be shared in a healthy relationship. Moving on then to the last of the three insecure attachment styles. This one is the fearful avoidant attachment style. The worldview of someone with this attachment style is I'm not okay and you're not okay. They believe that they're bad, they're flawed and unlovable, and that others are too. So they learn to devalue themselves and to devalue other people. And their relationships are always unhealthy. And they fluctuate between really needing a relationship to having a strong reaction to it and needing to get away from it. I think the one and only time I attracted someone who was fearful avoidant, I had left a city and had sold everything, didn't have a car, didn't have any furniture, didn't have anything. So friends had, when I came to the city, had taken me in. And so when this woman and I got, this was like decades ago, when we got together, she invited me to live with her. Well, the first thing was she had to buy me a car because I didn't have a car. And I didn't have a computer, so she bought me a computer. And as you would do in any relationship, I had dreams and desires and goals. And a pattern started to emerge where anything that I expressed that I possibly was interested or wanted, she would go out and buy. A Sea-Doo, a motorhome, a dog I didn't even really want. She was continuously letting her boundaries down, and like she would give me everything. And then all of a sudden, she had a conversation with someone that I introduced her to do our books and that for the small business that we were developing. And that person said something to her, and boom, she shut down. That was it. Get out. No conversation, no discussion. That's a typical way that a person who is has a fearful avoidant attachment style operates. They are either totally 100% in and give up all of their boundaries and will do anything to hang on to that relationship, and then all of a sudden they wake up to that, they've had enough, and boom, totally cut it off and run away from it. No talk, no discussion. This person, sadly, has the most work to do in order to grow, because not only do they have to do work on the relationship, on their relationship skills and seeing the other person as being okay and having valid needs, but they need to do a significant amount of work on themselves and to see that they have value and that their needs are important and need to be recognized. And as Heidi Priebe says, these people are in psychological hell. No judgment. It's not their fault. It's none of our fault. It's strategies that we had to develop as children, as infants, to survive based on what we were getting or not getting in return. So those are the 4 attachment styles. Maybe you've already been able to place yourself in there. To me, having discovered attachment theory, it's the closest thing that you're going to get to having a manual for understanding and doing human relationships. And just like financial literacy and emotional intelligence, I think that this should be mandatory education. Just like when you're buying a piece of furniture at IKEA, that maybe it's a more complicated piece of furniture, you can choose to attempt to put it all together on your own without using the manual and possibly make a bunch of mistakes. Or you can read the manual and follow it along step by step and get it done much more effectively and quickly. Yes, learning about attachment theory, placing yourself in it, and doing the work necessary to learn how to meet your own needs and learn how to respond differently, to recognize the styles that you're traditionally attracted to and to not react the way that you normally do will require work. And some it'll take longer than others. But I can promise you that it will be well worth it. Not only will your relationships improve, will you attract totally different partners, but how you feel about yourself and your ability to meet your own needs and to become a generally much more emotionally healthy person, and therefore have much healthier relationships, the work will be well worth it. So I hope that you got value out of this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, then hit the notification bell so you're notified of when I post new videos. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.